ஏஐ ஹியூமன் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸை ரிப்ளேஸ் பண்ணுமா? இன்னைக்கு நிறைய நியூஸ்ல நீங்க பார்க்குற விஷயங்கள் ஆர்டிஃபிஷியல் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸும் மெஷின் லேர்னிங்கும் பல பேருடைய வேலை வாய்ப்புகளை இழந்துட்டாங்க. ஸோ அவங்க இன்னைக்கு வேலை வாய்ப்புகள் இல்லாமல் இருக்காங்க. காரணம் இந்த ஏஐ இது எல்லாமே பண்ணிடுது அப்படிங்கிற விஷயம் நீங்க பார்க்குறீங்க. ரெண்டாவது, இன்னைக்கு சைபர் செக்யூரிட்டிக்குள்ள இந்த ஏஐ என்ன மாதிரியான பங்குகளை வகிக்குது அப்படிங்கிற விஷயங்களும் நீங்க தெரிஞ்சுக்கணும் அப்படின்னா இந்த சைபர் வாய்ஸ் இங்கிலீஷ் டெக்டாக் சீரீஸ்ல செகண்ட் பர்சன்ல நம்ம பேச போறோம். அவர் யாருன்னா மிஸ்டர் சஷாங்க் திவாரி, யூனோ.ஏ அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு கம்பெனியுடைய ஃபவுண்டர். இன்னைக்கு கலிஃபோர்னியாவில் அவர் இருக்காரு. அவர்கிட்ட இருந்து உண்மையாவே இந்த ஏ அப்படிங்கிறது ஹியூமன் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸை ரிப்ளேஸ் பண்ணுமா? அண்ட் இன்னைக்கு கரண்டா சைபர் செக்யூரிட்டிக்குள்ள இந்த ஏ அப்படிங்கிற கான்செப்ட் எப்படி கொண்டு வரலாம்? இன்னைக்கு ஒரு புது கம்பெனியை நீங்க ஆரம்பிக்க போறீங்க, இல்ல ஆல்ரெடி ஒரு கம்பெனியில் ஒர்க் பண்றீங்க, ஒரு என்டர்பிரைஸ் லெவலில் ஒர்க் பண்றீங்கன்னா இந்த ஆர்டிஃபிஷியல் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் அப்படிங்கிறது உள்ள எந்த மாதிரியான பங்குகளை வகிக்கும், எந்த மாதிரியான டிஃபென்ஸ் ஸ்ட்ரென்த்தை பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அடுத்த லெவலுக்கு கொண்டு போகும் அப்படிங்கிற விஷயங்களையும் பார்க்க போறோம். கண்டிப்பா நல்லதுன்னு ஒன்று இருந்தால் கெட்டதுன்னு ஒன்று இருக்கும். ஸோ அதனால நல்லதையும் பார்க்க போறோம், கெட்டதையும் பார்க்க போறோம். இந்த மாதிரி இந்த இங்கிலீஷ் டெக் டாக்ஸை ஃபுல்லாக பாருங்க, நிறைய இன்சைட்ஸ் உங்களுக்கு கேதர் பண்ண முடியும். Hello, Cyber Warriors. Today we are going to have a English Tech Talk series in our Cyber Voyage channel. So today we are going to meet Mr. Shashank Tiwari, and then let me give a small background about him. He's an entrepreneur, and then we can call him as a CEO, and then the executive engineer and the mathematician. And overall, he has around like 25 years of experience in various aspects, and also in that 25 years of experience, he played a couple of vital roles, which is a mentor, he's an advisor, and he's an investor, he's an architect, and then he was a team lead. And currently, he's the co-founder of Uno.ai platform, and currently he resides at California. And why we are going to have a discussion with Mr. Shashank is he's very good insights about AI in cybersecurity. Because if you looked at in LinkedIn, or else if you go to any other platforms, always there will be a first questions: will AI replace human intelligence? So in this discussion, and we are going to have lots of insights about AI in cybersecurity. And then thank you so much for coming here, Shashank, and welcome to our channel. Vanakkam, Shashank.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me so much, Dinesh. I've been a big fan of your channel. I think you have created a very vibrant community actually down there in South India, primarily in, I guess, Tamil. That's where your channel sort of thrives the most, but now you've expanded onto English as well. So thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Shashank. The first question, because right now the cyber security is a very booming area, even any other world or any other areas, because like it's been like 10 years of experience. Like cyber security has been boomed on 2015, so it's 2024, so it's been like 9 years. Even if you go to any other YouTube channels or any other platforms, they always tell a single questions: will AI replace human intelligence? So people get scared about AI, because I want to know whether is it a real feeling, whether human needs to scare. Does really AI is coming to cyber security, whether people whether they need to scare, or they want to go for an upgrade knowledge, or they want to study some other education, whether they can survive with the AI techniques. So I would like to get an answer from you, Mr. Sashank.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a very pertinent topic. It's a topic that is being discussed in various forums around the world, right? And I think you're right. It almost borders on two extremes. On one side is extreme excitement of AI is going to come here and do all the work, and we'll all be sitting vacationing 365 days a year. That's one sort of utopian view. And then the other view, which is, well, AI is going to come for us. It's the Terminator for real, take away our jobs, take away everything that we decide today. It will take away our autonomy, and we'll be left with nothing, right? So I think they're the two extremes that the world is kind of painting a picture around. In my opinion, because we've been deep in this world, we were among the first few people who really made a big bet on AI in cybersecurity, and about 2 years and a change started this company called Uno AI, with the primary mission to build an intelligent machine. We are probably also one of the most sophisticated, advanced platforms in that space. And I think why I'm mentioning that is we've invested a lot of time, essentially, in other words, trying to understand and learn what can be done, what is possible, and what is not possible. And with that background, I think my take today is that we are quite a distance away from AI really replacing humans. Maybe that will happen someday in the future. Nobody's seen the future. I haven't, you haven't, nobody else has either. So, we don't know how that'll pan out. Certainly, directionally, a lot of effort, time, money is being invested in this space to make AI more useful, more intelligent, kind of become more human-like. And so ultimately, I do feel like any mission that we put our heart to, we put our time to, will finally materialize. Right now, the question is, when will it materialize? Will it materialize tomorrow morning? Will it materialize a year out, 5 years out, 10 years out, 50 years out? I think that, honestly speaking, still needs to be determined. I don't think we have a very clear answer around it. In fact, a lot of the conversation today around AGI, which is kind of like a sort of the acronym which has caught on a lot of buzz, right? Because it is thought of as super intelligence, right? And is being spread a lot by folks who are working in the world of LLMs, especially foundational models. Um, Firstly, I don't think AGI and super intelligence in the way we are thinking is the same as what is being built out, right? So the human-like capability to make autonomous decisions, to understand all the different, sort of gray zone or ill-defined problem spaces and learn on its own, we are very far away from it. We're nowhere close to it. Now, in terms of other pieces of what it might do, yes, absolutely. I think you will start seeing, and we are already beginning to see, specialized intelligence, or very specialized cases where AI is going to come in as a force multiplier, right? Where AI will certainly end up doing a lot of the work that we as humans do, and where AI can perhaps surpass us. For example, I'll give you a very simple example. Today, if you have in the world of cybersecurity, just as an example, if you have to do control testing, right, and you had a very complex environment, I'm not even taking a very complex problem here, a very simple problem, right? You would really have to collect data and integrate with everything out there in your ecosystem. And if you're a large bank, large healthcare company, or a large government entity, that means a lot of work. It might take you months just simply to collect all the data, run tests against every single setup, and then, conclude. So today, in a human way, what we end up doing is we sample, we use the good old technique of statistics. We find representative samples, right? We bases our judgment, say, well, these are things that matter the most or are representative, and we go test them. Right now with AI, if AI is able to replicate some of the specialized tasks, let's say around control testing, while it is not bounded by either scale or speed, it could do a lot more than humans do, and it doesn't even get fatigued, right? So sure enough, you might move in that space from sampling to actually doing the entire population coverage, essentially testing every single thing in terms of security controls, right? So those kinds of things will certainly happen. And I think those kinds of things that will happen will actually make humans better. I don't think they will leave humans worse off, right? So we shouldn't be worried. We should actually look at it with, I would say, contained excitement, right? Where we should be excited about its possibilities, but also know that it is limited. It's not endless. It's not replacing a human. So that would be my 2 cents to kind of start this conversation with.
Exactly, Shashank. So based on your insights, of course, we can implement many technologies in AI, any technologies, whether it will be in a cybersecurity, or it could be any other e-commerce or any other information technologies development or whatever it is. But the decision making parts will comes to the humans, because we don't always rely on AI, because some cases we never rely on AI, but human decision matters. But that doesn't mean that AI will not replace human intelligence. Of course, we get a lots of opportunities, and also you have mentioned our decision making skills will be improved, because when we are implementing AI technology in our company, let me implement AI technology in my company. Of course, my decision skills should be it should be improved, because it will think like anything. So it is like it's a kind of machine learning. It think like anything, but the same way I should have to think. So of course, I got some input like our skills will be improved, and that is the one thing that I can get it from this insight. And second thing is, what is AI in cyber security? Because 10 years back or 15 years back or 20 years back, there will be couple of trends. If some persons they want to get into any other domains, or the person, if I need to implement any other technologies, that could be a dark site intelligence, that could be a threat intelligence, that could be auto remediation, that could be VAPT, GRC, or compliance, or whatever it is. In that field, how AI will be coming inside? Like let me give you the real time scenario. I'll be the founder of any companies, or I'm going to start a new company. How
Mhm.
AI that I can implement to secure my company, to make sure my company is secure, and then my data is secure. How I can integrate with my current ecosystems, like my companies. So what is AI in cybersecurity over here?
Yeah, no, no, great question. So let me sort of again give a tiny bit of context here, because the word AI has become so overused and so overloaded that I'm not even sure if everybody understands it the same way, right? So maybe it's
Exactly.
worthwhile to define that a tiny bit. And
Exactly.
once we define it, I think answering your question in terms of how does AI play a role in cybersecurity or where are its, best advantages, if you may, would become very clear, right? So if you really think about what has been called AI today is actually an amalgamation of different things, right? Like there's the old school
Mm-hmm.
technique of machine learning, right? Both
Mm-hmm.
supervised, semi-supervised techniques that have existed for a while, for, decade and more. And it
Mm-hmm.
has been used quite effectively in cybersecurity as well, especially around anomaly detection,
Mm-hmm.
pattern, inference, stuff like that, right? So it's been around, right? And that's very handy for classification, detection, right? Sort of noise reduction, right? It has already done a fair amount of service, as much as we would like to, call it ineffective. I think, if you look at what we used to do prior to these techniques, I think this is certainly a more efficient, more effective way of doing things, right? Now, the current generation of what is being called AI is largely driven by this whole concept of encoder decoder models or large language models, as they're called.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this new incarnation of AI, if you may, the primary benefit comes out of understanding of language. So the understanding of language and the human speak, if you may, or the ability to read and analyze like a human is what is the new bit, if you may, in terms of AI, right? And so that's why when we go to ChatGPT and we ask it a question and it responds back with fluency, we get excited because it almost feels human-like, right? As if somebody is typing on the other side and, someone like us is responding to us, right? Um, so the way to think about this is when you look at the old plus the new, yes, there are newer frontiers or newer ways where AI can positively impact cybersecurity and it can negatively impact cybersecurity as well. So we can maybe look at both. So, from a positive impact standpoint, certainly all processes in the world of cyber
Mm-hmm.
that are centered around ingestion of large amounts of data, ingestion of large amounts of understanding of the data, which essentially means reading it, parsing it, analyzing it, annotating it, understanding the nuance context of that particular data set, and then making some sort of an aggregation or decision analytics or inference out of this data set, that would certainly get impacted. There is no two ways on that. And that is where the most of the benefits are. Now, let's get a little more specific. So if you start looking at vulnerability management as a simple example,
Mm-hmm.
how do you do vulnerability management today? Well, firstly, you would have some sort of a scanner, right? That would be run across some part of your stack. Either you're, scanning your code, scanning your infrastructure, scanning your binary, scanning your configuration. You're scanning something, right? And I'm simplifying it down, but that's basically what we're doing, right? And then what is happening out of it? Out of it, we are getting a lot of these scan results. And the scan results are in the form of basically vulnerabilities with some information about vulnerabilities. And typically these vulnerabilities would map to a cataloged set that we have, so a set of CVEs, it's an example.
Mm-hmm.
And then what would end up really happening is we would start studying them, right? And we would start studying them using all kinds of inputs, our own contextual input, right? What does our configuration and setup look like? And also public information. Does somebody know that this is exploitable? What is Meter Framework talking about it? What
Mm-hmm.
is CISA saying about it? What are some of the other experts talking about it, right? And so effectively, what we end up doing is we end up triaging, prioritizing, fixing, patching these vulnerabilities basis all the knowledge we have collected, either from our own effort or by leaning on all this public information, combining everything together, then deciding what to do with that vulnerability, right? So that's how we do it in the world of cyber. Now, it is a very large scale because the more scanners are appearing, the more types of systems are appearing, you start seeing a lot more of these vulnerabilities come through, a lot more analysis come through, a lot more people having opinions on it, a lot more sources to go to, right? And so the question now becomes, do I have infinite amounts of time to really go read hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities, every source input, combine it, analyze it all at the same time, figure out what's relevant,
Mm-hmm.
and then make a decision on top of it, right? And most of the time, the answer is no, because nobody has infinite amounts of time. So you form some procedure to try and prioritize. You say, I'm going to pick these because, these are the ones I think are most exploitable. Or we pick up these because this is what the industry is saying is most dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what AI would do there as an example is AI would come and be able to do that at scale, right? So it's able to actually read all these different inputs, kind of read it for you, analyze it for you,
Mm.
annotate it for you, right? And kind of give you a little bit more of the cooked food, if you may, as opposed to raw vegetables, right? To think of it that way, right? So now you can decide which dish you want to eat, but you've got food on the table, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to now somebody just giving you a whole bag of vegetables. Well, you got to slice them, cut them, clean them, cook them, right? And so that's a lot more work, right? So that is where I think the modern generation, I just gave that as an example. It also applies
yeah,
to many other disciplines. For example, risk and compliance is a very good application. Some bits of threat intel, I think it is very relevant. But in all these cases, it boils down to really that simplistic concept of, can the modern generation of AI, which is an expert in languages, step
mm,
in and do the work that we as humans actually find very cumbersome and difficult to do at scale, which is reading lots of text, analyzing lots of information, combining them, right? Kind of collating them, annotating them, parsing them, right? So that's where the modern sort of flavor of AI shines. So certainly, I think, we will certainly see a lot of these modern companies and vendors as well take advantage of that as far as AI and cybersecurity goes. Now, there's a second part that I mentioned. I'll probably wait on that. I'm sure we'll touch upon it at some point in time, but there's also the flip side of the coin. I mean, we are
mm,
talking about the good parts, right? But
exactly.
there's also the flip side, because nothing is stopping the adversary, right? The malintent participants in this equation of cybersecurity to also take advantage of it, right? And there is lots of that coming as well. We can touch upon that. I think that's another interesting area to understand as defenders, right? As people who are interested in making cyber posture and cybersecurity at large work for us.
Exactly, Shashank. So you have clearly articulated the message like there are two things that you can make use of with the AI concept. Because previously security operations for detecting anomaly detections or hot IP detections or any scan URLs, if something endpoint detections, already the AI is there. Like machine learning techniques are there in already the SIM concepts. There are few vendors they use SIM for AI, and AI technology they have used for an SIM to detect vulnerabilities. But the current technology, the current generation, why we say AI in everything, so it should be the LLM. That's what you have given the real-time example. If you are going to do a VAPT, why do you want to scan? I'll do that for you. If you want to go for reporting, why do you want to report? I'll do that for you. If you want to spend a manual penetration testing report, or if you are going to implement or integrate or any do automation or DevSecOps, I'll do everything for you. You just integrate with multiple tools that we will provide a tool. And other things also that you have given, like currently the most of the vendors also they clearly mentioned we have AI technology has been implemented with our tool itself. If you are
Mhm.
going to integrate in this tool in your environment, automatically it detects, automatically it narrates whatever happens in your environment. So that's what the Bing co-pilot has been happened. If it's a kind of chat GPT, if you want to integrate in your own environment, if you are having a team discussion, I don't want, if someone is not attending the meeting, then I will narrate
Mhm.
for you after 1 hour what happened in that meeting. If you add in Copilot, it will give them like 1 hour meeting. If you are not even attending that particular meeting itself, we can able to get those information. So that is also clearly that you have mentioned like it's a LLM model. So that's what previously A was there, but now LLM is going to be introduced and it is going to be in the future. It is going to be a future. And the other questions, Mr. Shashank, because if you take any vendors, so if you go for any other vendors, let's say I'm going to implement a new GRC tools in my environment, or else I'm
Mhm.
going to implement any new kind of external attack surface management, or else I'm going to implement any kind of endpoint detections or IDS or IPS or any kind of methodologies or softwares. Companies, they'll pitch like we have AI detection in our environment.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
have AI CISA advices also we have. Even though if something attacks happen in your environment, we have a CISA advisories. We have couple of advisories has been implemented in our environment. You don't need to worry about that. If some things happen in your environment, automatically we will detect and we will give you the notification. These advices give you the, the patching updates or any updates. We will give you via AI. Now I would like to know how accuracy is that, because let's say I'm going to take like EASM tool or any other tool which I'm going to implement in my environment, and the tool vendors they told we have 100% or else 95% detection for the new vulnerabilities. Let's say something
Mhm.
happens in your environment, it's not about exploitation, post exploitation, lateral movement, and how accuracy is that. can I believe the technology? Can I believe the vendor in that cases? Because as a startup companies, if I'm going to implement any new technologies, do I need to believe those information, or else which point I need to make sure to
Hmm.
believe what vendor says, which one I need to take it forward here?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. And it's a very good nuance that you have put in out there in terms of sort of a spectrum. At what point should you feel confident enough, right, in terms of accuracy? So let me again give you paint a little bit more perspective here, because, we spent a lot of time, energy in this over the last couple of years, trying to essentially make the system more dependable, more reliable, right? Something that's trustworthy.
Mhm,
Um, our learnings from our journey so far, and we are continuing to sort of, invest a lot of time, effort into it, is that I don't think there is a silver bullet out there. There isn't some sort of a technique out there that can certainly you can put that switch on and you become good or trustworthy. The reality is that this modern generation of AI, LLMs primarily, they are good at some things. For example, they could also generate things for you, write the report, right? Do some analysis for you, generate graphs for you, right? Like all these things they're really good at doing. And as you already mentioned, even um, examples of Bing chat coming in and summarizing a conversation that occurred 2 hours ago, right? So all of these are great feature sets.
mhm,
Now the question is, many a times by design, these systems, as they do their generation and writing and summarization and explanation, they tend to make up things, right? And so I don't know if you noticed it. I was telling this to someone else in a another podcast, that I had wonderful conversation like this one around was um, early on, and I don't know if that's improved, but this is almost a year ago. One of the first thing that I was curious about was I said, well, let me go and ask one of these systems, right? One of these conversational agents, and ask them which has been the most critical vulnerability of 2023, and how should I go fix it? And so I go ask that question, and I
mhm,
get a very good, nice explanation saying, hey, here is this CV, blah, blah, blah. Here is how it can be exploited. I think you should go and patch them immediately. It's a vulnerability in, Apache, with so on and so forth. And it sounded very convincing, right?
mhm,
And it sounded very good. And so I get excited. I said, wow, look at this. The analysis is so perfect. It is so clear. It's so clean. It not only understands and explains everything, but even gives you a patch and remediation steps. Now, here is where the story falls apart. So I take that particular CVE,
mhm,
go to the CVE database and search for it, and I don't find it, right? Because this particular LM had completely made it up. It was absolute fiction, right? Like it didn't exist. There was no such CVE. And so now the question is, and the reason I bring that forward is that a lot of these accurate sounding things may actually be completely fictitious. They may completely be fake, right? And of course, we talk about this in the world of large language models as hallucinations, right?
mhm,
Like this is the word that has become very popular lately, right? And then there's a whole conversation about how do you reduce hallucinations, right? But if you actually again go back and look at the technology, hallucination is a feature, not a bug in that technology,
mhm,
right? The whole concept of the technology is to be creative and write stuff for you. It is meant to be a system that can be fluent in a particular language. And as a part of its creativity and fluency,
mhm,
effectively, which is essentially the next token prediction and a few other things that it does, it suffers from hallucinations, right? And so now the question is, a system that perhaps has this kind of unreliable outcomes from time to time, right?
mhm,
Is it something that you can use to drive your cybersecurity program,
mhm,
right? Like, can you rely on it, right? And so not only cyber, but just about any mission critical system, but certainly we are talking cyber. And in cyber, sometimes it can be even more dangerous, because what if it impacts a production system and is asking you to redo something which is not even required, or actually could be catastrophic? It could actually bring that system down, right? So I think like there is still a lot of work to be done there. Now, what we have seen, and which is why we went down that path, is that I think over indexing or getting overexcited on one technology is dangerous, just like it has been dangerous in the past, right? And so I think that a fair amount of balance here, where you combine some rule-based systems, perhaps you combine knowledge graph, combine deep learning, like we do. We use a fair amount of LLM in our technology, very sophisticated, fine-tuned, domain-trained version. But we
mhm,
also combine it with other things. We combine that with knowledge graph. We combine that with deep learning, we combine that in some cases with other kind of guardrails. I
Mm,
think that's where you will start seeing higher accuracy. I wouldn't say it'll be 100%,
mm,
but now you're getting into the realm of usable accuracy, 90% plus, right? And even there, I think over a period of time, you will need human in the loop.
yeah.
And so anybody who's saying, hey, this will be a completely autonomous engine that will do stuff on its own, I think we're a little distance away from it. What it will be and where I think there'll be benefits is for a lot of these cumbersome tasks, you will see it as a major productivity boost, right? And then there is a human in the loop. And in fact, I like to say this that, today the human is the doer and the human is the reviewer, right? If you think of it in terms of tasks of cybersecurity, very kind of high level, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's doing all the tasks and somebody who's reviewing, and then there is action, right? So there's usually three parts of the puzzle: doing, reviewing, and action, right? If you really simplify it down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the doing can get offloaded to AI. The
Okay.
reviewing and action might still remain in the realm of humans, right? So, which means, yes, all the time that you spend collecting all the data, analyzing it, doing stuff, generating reports, because humans also make errors. It's not like we are error free completely as human beings, right? We make judgment errors, we develop fatigue and, kind of make errors of, omission and commission and, other kinds of things that we do. So, my point is that, yes, the doing part can be offloaded off to AI, and especially if there's higher accuracy, keep the reviewing and action within the human realm. That way you have the guarantee to make sure that you have acceptable levels of reliability, right? And that's when you're seeing the benefits. But if you're going to offload it completely to AI, at this point in time, at least in the current technology and the current maturity of the technology, I think it could be dangerous, right? Because sure, maybe it'll work 80% of the time, maybe even 90% of the time, but you don't want a catastrophic one even 1% of the time, right? So you don't have the appetite for it.
Perfect, Shashank. So you have given the clear explanation for how do I believe it. So three things: doing, reviewing, and action. If you are going to implement any new technologies, let it be any technologies, let them do, let it do. Let it detect or let it detect whatever the AI algorithms or machine learning techniques or detection methodologies, whatever it is. Let's say if I'm going to integrate a new application for a threat intelligence or else dark side intelligence or dark side investigation. Now, let the AI does whether my credential has been leaked in dark web. Let it take care of it. But after that, whether it could be a true, it could be a false. So before sending an email to the breached person, let's say I'm going to implement a new policy, I'll be checking on the threat intelligence part that my data has been leaked on dark web. Now I have integrated a new solutions for dark web integration. Now AI will takes care of all the research from the Spiderfoot frameworks or any open source intelligence frameworks. Let it take care of all those things. Now, the reviewing part, whether this credential are really leaked from the API or from the dark web or something like that. Then reviewing part, of course, humans should has to do, and the action part. If you want to send an email to your team member, you need to take care of that. You need to take a decision on it, get a higher management decision, higher management approval, then make it forward. So doing, reviewing, action. So doing part, AI will take care of it. Reviewing and action part will be human takes care of it. It's clearly articulated message that you have given. And now if I'm going to implement a new technology, what are all the regulations I should follow? Because last couple of weeks ago, chat GPT, because when I asked these questions to my students or my couple of professionals, what chat GPT does? Yeah, if you ask questions, you get the results. Okay, then I'll be asking a question, sir, do you can you able to hack any IP address? I need to recon an IP address. What would be the information from the reconnaissance of IP address? Okay, give me a real-time scenario. There is a system has been affected by the Palo Alto vulnerability. Now I want to exploit the particular systems. ChatGPT will give you a message like you are doing like something you get a like we will not do it
Mm-hmm.
because it will not under my fault. It's like they have a regulations. Likewise, if I'm going to do any other AI, because I've seen warm GPT and now
Mm-hmm.
malvolent AI, you already the before first part you have mentioned, of course advantages are there, at the same time disadvantages that is also there. So rise of AI, the same way rise of malvolent AI. Now how do we consider this and how do we make sure to prevent from malvolent AI here?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of different points you make here. One is that, I think the original point you were trying to make is like you are a white hat hacker who's trying to learn and understand, right, as opposed to a
Exactly.
malicious party. So can I not use the tool to do simulation and understanding, and I should have the ability to do it, right? And yes, I think you should, right? So like there is definitely that part. And then the part like what are the threats here, what are the regulations out here that might play a big part,
Yeah.
and how does it do with, again, malicious parties, the nefarious ones who want to use this technology to do more harm, right? Like how do we protect against it? Well, again, I think this is a new technology like any other, and one will have to understand what are the downsides or possible downsides that we should be aware of as a starting point, right? And I think that if you start thinking about it, there are multiple different facets. In fact, I think I had another conversation recently on a panel discussion, and I was bringing this out that there are probably 5 different vectors you want to think about
Mm-hmm.
when you look at any AI system and its, sort of possible harm, if you want to think of it that way. So one possible harm is around cybersecurity itself, in the sense that the malicious party takes advantage of it, and essentially there are newer threats, right? Whether there is newer types of data leak, newer types of attacks, newer types of adversarial behavior, and you have to defend against it, right? Just like we did with emergence of mobile, right? We had to do new things that we didn't do prior to mobile. A lot of the cybersecurity today really grew because of very, very rapid digitization. I mean, we are all a online world, right? And so a lot of that emerged post the internet, which we didn't care about when systems were sitting cordoned off in their own private networks, right? So same way, I think AI will create some new threat vectors, and we have to take care of it. The second part, which I think is equally important, is in terms of ethicality, which has been discussed about. Like, if you start looking at AI, is it making ethically sound behavior? Now, we don't want to get into morality and ethicality too much, but it's a difficult subject because as humans, right or wrong, we are in a way bounded by some social norms of how we behave, what we recommend, what we do, and can we trust AI to do that? The third part would be privacy, equally important part of the puzzle, because if you start thinking about it, once you put data in a large system like LLM, is there a way even to take out of it? And I have made this analogy in the past. Putting a piece of data in the LLM today in the larger foundational models is similar to taking a glass of water and putting it down in the ocean. Once the glass of water has gone into the ocean, there's no figuring out where is that particular water from that glass in the ocean. It has all gotten mixed up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's no way of pulling that water back out of the ocean. It's the same kind of a problem today. So now if you start looking at privacy regulations, for example, one example I would give more specifically is if you look at GDPR, it says that
Yeah.
if there is a party that says delete my data or you have to remove it, you should have a provable way of actually removing the data out of that system, right? You should go and remove that record. And we've seen enough of this conversation around this, where it's been hard even in distributed systems to do that because there are multiple copies of every data set and various shapes, forms that it actually manifests. In the AI world, that makes it even more complex,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now you cannot even do any kind of guaranteed removal. And that's just one part of the puzzle, right? So that becomes the whole privacy issue.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is the fourth dimension of intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this has also been debated quite a bit. AI is saying things basis what it's learning off the web. Who actually owns the intellectual property, if you may, right? And so then this also goes around the entire concept of, if you look at intellectual property, you could also think of it in a flip way in terms of attribution responsibility. If the AI system does some harm for whatever reason, who
Yeah.
is the one who will be held accountable? Is that the builder of the AI system? Is that the original source of information that the AI system acted on behalf of? So that whole attribution intellectual property becomes a tricky part. And
Mm-hmm.
then last but not the least, and this is where I think we started out with our last conversation, kind of the last, couple of pieces we're discussing is around accuracy, right? Like, is it hallucinating, making up things, or is it for real? Right? So if you start looking at these dimensions, multiple dimensions, there are still many parts of, sort of the modern AI stack, if you may, or the large language model based stack that are still unknown. Right now, of course, we are jumping in as a society, and a lot of governments and standards bodies are trying to define, controls around it and define regulations around it. And some of this behavior also, I think, the chat GPT behavior of not answering certain questions or Gemini not wanting to answering certain things is out of that, right? They just don't want to get entangled into any kind of, regulatory downside, right? They don't want to end up having a liability that didn't sign up for, right? But having said that, last but not the least, the technology is available and it's being used gainfully by malicious parties as well. Like I think you mentioned the worm GPT. Um, there are in some cases where I feel like it's equally beautiful for malicious intent, right? Phishing is an example. And in fact, if you think about it today, it's almost phishing on steroids. And how is that so? Well, you can use deep fakes, right? We already saw a case where somebody was fooled into sending a few $1 million, I believe, right? Wire some money from Singapore, where the person on the other side of the wire who was on a conference call, right, very believable conference call, was actually run by deep fakes. We also see that in political setups today, where political leaders are supposedly saying things which they never did because these are deep fakes, right, or versions of these political leaders, dissuading and misguiding humans at large. So now you think about that being applied to cybersecurity, just like that particular place where there was, a fraud case of fraudulent wire transfer using deepfake. Well, this is now deepfake plus variations of sort of phishing type of, messages being crafted. You're really looking at phishing and distortion of reality at a very, very large scale, right? And also that you would see this become available at a very cheap cost,
Yeah.
right? Which is also dangerous, right? So anything like, a weapon that is very cheap to acquire is more dangerous than a weapon that is very expensive to acquire, right? Because then it'll be in fewer hands. And I think with malicious, sort of AI becoming available more broadly and very cheaply, you would start seeing essentially the next set of attacks like we see today with the dark web and like DDoS and other kinds of attacks, which has become very commoditized, right? You don't even need to be technically savvy to run those attacks anymore. You can quite literally just lease off at just like your cloud services, some services to go run that attack. And I think the same would happen, with these deep fakes and phishing and other types of, newer sets of issues. So yes, I think there is both the good and the bad coming with it, together, if you may.
Exactly, Shashank. So as per your insights, like whatever it is, there will be a positive side or negative side. So even though everything has a two options. So if you go for a positive, of course you get some positive things. If you go for a negative, then of course you get the negative things. Even for a web application penetration testing, there will be a black box testing and white box testing, and then there will be do for some gray box testing. The same way, if AI is going to come for the future, of course, more scams is going to come, more attacks is going to come, more real-time scenario case studies will be coming, and based on that, cyber criminals will be exploiting in a new way technologies and new attack scenarios. So for this, of course, what we need is the positive end. Of course, the same end at the same side, we need to make sure how attacks is going to come, how to prevent our environment from the cyber criminals. The user
Hmm.
awareness sessions, that is also really important, because user education awareness, whatever we say, A is going to come, A is going to come, which you are going to implement a new technology. I have IDS, I have IPS, whatever it is. But even the employee always they click on malicious phishing link and then they'll enter the username and password. For that, user education is required. And then also you have articulated another message like, of course, if you are going to integrate a new AI, of course regulations will be followed up, and the intellectual property will be followed up. So each and everything will be followed up, but it's still enough designing phase. It's like not implemented properly. Like still we are learning. It is not about properly. It's still we are learning it. So of course we'll be learning many things in future. And other question, Shashank, will AI predict 0 day? Because I cannot ask a question. Will AI detect 0 day? Will AI predict 0 day? Is there any possibilities in future? Let's say I'm going to release some malicious products or some defective product which the customers are using. Is there
Right.
any possibility with the help of LLM in future? Is there any possibility to predict AI? I mean the
That's a good
0 day.
question, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So I think that the way to think about this is predicting a zero to would essentially mean, in other words, having the ability to look at things that we have not thought of today, right? So essentially, if you look at known issues and unknown issues, it's kind of
Mhm.
getting into the realm of unknown, or kind of peeling some of that unknown off and chipping away at it, right? So like kind of putting that more into the known, as much as in the known as possible. Um, Certainly, I think like there are two possibilities, and it may not necessarily happen with LLMs alone, right? There might be newer incarnations of technology as it becomes more context aware. It starts becoming more with, you know, sort of stitched into the fabric of your own organization or data set or usage, and stuff like that, which is more specific, perhaps induced by a knowledge graph and other kinds of mechanisms along with LLMs. Um, I think what we will end up seeing is that certainly this footprint of, if you think of the universe as known and unknown, right?
Mhm.
And when I say the universe in this case, obviously I'm implying largely from a threat vector standpoint, nothing too philosophical here at the moment. But if you start thinking from a threat vector standpoint, there are some known potential threats, right? And then
Mhm.
there are the unknowns. And usually 0 days come up because they fall in the realm of unknown. Like we
Mhm.
didn't think of it earlier, or we didn't know that this situation could actually arise. And that usually arises once that product is out there in the wild. Somebody discovers that unknown and takes advantage of it, right? There was a weakness that nobody knew of. So I think with the going back to the same thing of sampling versus expanding your footprint, ability to test more scenarios, certainly I think that some flavor of AI, if you may, or some aspects of AI would help you expand that known part of the puzzle. You'd
Mhm.
be able to test a lot more and maybe do simulations around it, do some reasoning, proactive reasoning around it. And so in that sense, you could maybe think of it like, yeah, you would be able to predict some of those, which normally under our current circumstances would have fallen in the unknown realm, will
Mhm.
become known. So yes, of course, we'll catch a few of those. But the bigger question that remains is, can AI, or for that matter, a mixture of AI plus current techniques plus whatever else that is coming, can it really become all encompassing, right? And which in other words means that can it become fully known at all points in time,
Mhm.
right? And that I think is a little difficult one to answer. And I think that there will always be some unknowns. And the reason being that not everything in and around it is within your control. Some of these attacks or some of these, threat vectors arise because of externalities as well,
Mhm.
because of a certain configuration that becomes possible. There's a certain kind of a usage, a certain kind of an app that takes advantage of a platform, and therefore it opens up a new threat vector, right? Certain kind of a combination of some external situations that lead to that, particular 0 day exploit. So those will still be there. You won't be able to control the entire universe. You'll be able to control your universe, right? You can test all different scenarios and you can model a lot more out, but I doubt that you'd be able to look at every single possibility out there in the universe, right? So there'll always be some unknowns, and there might still be some 0 day exploits and 0 day threats that would exist. But certainly, I think as the technology matures, it would get compressed down to a very small subset, right? Like you would start sort of reducing that surface down. Now, I do want to mention one small piece here, because you spoke about that, a few minutes ago. Um, Although we talk about with a lot of romanticism about the 0 day exploits, 0 day threats, a large amount of hacks, breaches, threats actually happen in very plain vanilla way, right? It is exactly like where somebody would go and click a malicious link and give over their credentials, right? So it's nothing fancy. There is no Hollywood style fancy hacking happening. It's just that somebody succumbed to a thing that they shouldn't have. And so I think it really boils down to, when we make this AI or any other technique, we should also equally use that technology to increase things like user awareness, do a more on what we already know today. So forget about the 0 day ones, but the known issues, just analyze that at scale, make people aware of it at scale. Maybe even use this technology for things like cyber training, right? Cyber documentation, right? Because it's very possible to do it. Those are also very language centric. And I think you might end up seeing a lot more result out of it. You might actually see a lot more positive outcome as well, just by investing in those spaces. So I feel there's a bit of that as well, right? Like as much as we talk about 0 and yes, 0 day, we should go and avoid them because sometimes they can be very dangerous. I think 80% of the time it's plain vanilla, mundane style of somebody just, making their credentials available, and then the attack emerges from there.
Okay, great, Shashank. And the final question, let's say maybe we can take it as a real time scenarios. Let's say a company owned many tools. So it might have multiple technologies that you, before you told we need to give a cyber education awareness on the tools.
Mm.
And let's say I have like 20 plus 30 plus tools, because most of the data breach case studies, if you look at the data breach case studies, they, with their investigation, they would have
Mhm.
clearly mentioned we had this technology, but still data breach happened. But in that cases, how do we give a sessions to the employees, or else how can we give a sessions, and how can we prepare for the cyber attacks? Because
Yeah.
even if you take, many organization might have a 50 plus tools or 30 plus tools has been integrated in their end. CISOs has been given budgets for cyber security. They have
Yeah.
giving more budgets to cyber security. But the thing is, employees are not ready to acquire the knowledge. So in that such scenarios, even if you go to a couple of companies, if you ask, you have this technology? Yes, I have. Do you know how it works? People say, I don't know. Do you have an
Mhm.
access? Yes, I have an access. In that cases, people who have an access to their technology, to the company or any startup companies or big MNCs, how do I acquire knowledge? How do people can acquire knowledge of the particular cybersecurity tools? How we can implement a cybersecurity program in an organization?
Right.
Then, because when we implement a cybersecurity program, that would leads to preventing, and we can expect from cyber criminals that this might happen. So how do we
Right.
implement a program, and how can this to be implemented in any organization, Sasha?
No, no, this is a very true statement that you made, and it's actually a bigger problem than the lack of tools. In fact, there are enough tools. Perhaps there are more tools than you need, right, in most organizations, especially the organizations that are under attack, right, like larger corporates, governments. They have enough and more tools. It's a matter of are they able to take advantage of it? The reality is, if you start thinking about this larger realm of sort of tool usage, one, understanding of tools and using the configurations appropriately and to full extent is still something that is a pipe dream. I think in most organizations, they don't use the tools as properly as they're meant to be used, right? And in fact, more tools keep coming. There's a tool sprawl, right? Like whenever something happens, or when there is a new threat or new fear, or new push towards a new sort of a cyber posture assessment or risk assessment, you would add two more tools, but the existing tools don't necessarily get utilized as much. Now, here my thought is there are two ways to try and do it. One, that I think there needs to be deliberate focus on getting more value out of existing tools. I think like that is something that should fundamentally be pursued, right? And I think the way to pursue that, in my opinion, is to start looking at essentially analysis of current configurations, analysis of current output of those tools, analysis of current awareness of how those tools could help. So I think like that is a very important effort that I think every security organization should do, and should do it periodically. It's not a one-time effort. They should perhaps do it every quarter, or if not more often, to figure out the tools that I already have, how good are they? What does it tell me? And how has it helped me over the last time period since I reviewed it last time, right? So I think like that's one important initiative everyone needs to do. The second part, I think, there needs to be a deliberate effort, is rethinking cyber training. See, the cyber training programs today, like most corporate trainings, are meant to be one time or annual or at onboarding time or some sort of a timeline defined, where most participants, whether they're active cyber defense folks or whether they are, sort of more passive participants, employees in the larger part of the company who are being taught about anti-phishing or anti-whatever, right? Like, or, encrypted way of keeping a good data protection. All of this happens all at once, in the sense that they're really bombarded with a lot of these trainings. And then, like anything else, I think it becomes to a point where training is completed for the sake of completion, and most of the employees or most of the participants, one way or the other, kind of are detached from it. They don't take away any actionable item out of it, right? And so then the question becomes, what can you do? What kind of a training can you do to change the story? My belief always has been that I think on the job training or in context training is usually way more effective, because people learn much better from examples rather than just theoretical inputs, right? And so I think if we ran this more in the context of ongoing newer threats. So, for example, if say the cyber folks are right now worried about a certain kind of a threat, right? Let's just say deep fakes. I'm just making that up, right? And say you are a bank and you're worried about deep fakes and you've just heard about this, attack that has occurred somewhere else. Well, this is probably a good time to run some trainings just pointed towards deep fakes and maybe even have some simulations around it and have employees identify whether it's a deep fake or for real. And you can do those kinds of, fun trainings. When you do that and when it's pertinent and relevant, I think people will remember it, right? And as much as that, they will internalize it, which means they will do something about it the next time that they come across, those kinds of issues. And so I think like if we do one of these two things, rather both of them, right, where we keep assessing what value are we getting out of existing tools, and of course, we optimize it, we drop some tools, acquire some newer tools, and keep kind of rethinking, but actively look at it, right? Like every quarter, every so many days, every so many months, I think we will keep ourselves more honest in terms of are we getting true value out of the tools, right? The money that we're already spending. And the second part is make training and make participation a little bit more in context, a little bit more on the job, a little bit more, relatable, as opposed to theoretical training, check the box approach that, unfortunately ends up happening in most cases, where yes, everyone would have gone through the training, but by the end of the third day of training, everyone's forgotten whatever was discussed on day one, right? So you don't want that. You want a more effective conversation. So my inclination is always to do these couple of things in general, review often and let people learn in context.
Perfect, Shashank. So it was a excellent insights from your end because the company may have several tools, but what would be the value from the existing tools? The point which you have explained very clearly. And about the current technology, because you might have a different technology because every day new tool comes. But what you have, make sure to get proper output from that. So that you have clearly mentioned. The second thing is gamified environment. We can call it as a gamified or simulation environment. Let's say I have seen a news in Google Chrome. You need to update Google Chrome immediately. If you say this to any person, they will not update. They'll say, why should I? Why should I do that? I have installed Chrome like 10 years back, but still I use that version. Why should I update? But if you can tell them like there is a simulation platform, if you have used the particular outdated Chrome, what would be the
Right.
impact? Your camera can be exploitable, your data can be exploitable, the data can be exfiltrated from CNC communications. Likewise, we can give them a real-time simulation platform. So that is the excellent point that you have said, Mr. Shashank. Because so far it's like a 50 minutes conversation. We had an excellent insight from your end, like what is AI in cyber security and how this can be implemented in our organization and how a person, the current employees, how they can utilize the tools, how they can utilize the artificial intelligence in the current cyber security domain. And then you have given the real-time insights about if there is a tool, then how should have to utilize the particular tool. We have got most insights from you because so far the 50 minutes discussion, our cyber warriors has learned many things from your end, Shashank, because most of them from our cyber warriors, they'll be keep on asking whether AI will replace humans. They'll get no answers from the like experienced person. Now they got the answers, and cyber warriors, they have got many insights from your end. And then of course based on the companies, based on the corporate, based on the students, based on the technologies, detections, methodologies, tools, we have given lots of insights to them. Of course if they want to go into AI, if they want to go into any other domains, of course they learn from these videos. And thank you so much for this session, Mr. Shashank. It was a very great insights from your end, and thank you so much for your insights, Mr. Shashank, for our cyber channel.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad that you found it helpful. And also, actually, kudos to you, Dinesh, and kudos to your community. I think you're doing great service. Like I mentioned, your channel is very vibrant. There are a lot of people that listen to your channel and are learning from your channel, right? And talking about cyber education, I think this is a fun way also to teach and make people aware, right, of what the possibilities are. And I think you're doing a fantastic job there. So, once again, thank you for having me. And yeah, look forward to more conversations.
Sure, Shashank. Of course, we'll get many questions from cyber warriors. We'll plan for another session as well. So because we get the questions, because it's always like I don't want to prepare a questions from my end. I get questions from my cyber warriors, and then because they have a doubts. Because if I get a doubts from my cyber warriors, they learn something from my conversation, from our conversation, where I can bring more cyber security people to our channel. So this is what I always work. Of course, I'll get many inputs from my cyber warriors, and then I'll just schedule another session from you, Shashank. And thank you so much for this session, Mr. Shashank.
Thank you. Thank you very much.